Welcome to Women Exceeding Barriers. My name is Morgan Stewart, and I'm the creator and moderator of today's discussion. So, this event, well, I'd rather say a movement. This movement came into fruition as not only from my own experience, but also from listening to my colleagues discuss their experiences and challenges that they had to endure within the workforce. So, with that, I noticed that there were many similarities. And a couple of the similarities that stuck out to me were that they were in male-dominated industries, and at some point in their careers, they faced some form of either discrimination or bias because of the fact that they are women. So I also want to note that in many cases, women are generally underpaid, underrepresented, and mistreated in the workplace, and sadly, sometimes it goes unreported. So I also don't want to ignore the barriers that we face with race and color as well. So today, with our esteemed panelists, we're going to dive into these topics, and we're going to discuss these even further. So I hope that when you all leave today, you leave here motivated in order to play your part in helping to break that glass ceiling. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce our leading women. So first we have Olga Custodio. She is a retired lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Air Force, and she's also a former American Airlines captain. For 24 years, she served in the U.S. Air Force and retired to become a pilot for American Airlines for the course of 20 years. She is the first Hispanic woman to graduate from the U.S. Air Force pilot training. The first woman T-38 undergrad pilot instructor training flight instructors at Randolph Air Force Base, and the first Latina to be inducted into the San Antonio Aviation Hall of Fame. Next we have Lillian Dukes. Lillian is a global operations leader. She is an international speaker and senior operations leader with over 20 years of experience. She's had experience in startup, turnaround, and mature manufacturing environments. She's also ensured sustainable growth and cost reduction at companies such as Spirit Aerosystems, the Beechcraft The Beechcraft Corporation, American Airlines, American Eagle Airlines, and General Electric. With her experience, she's proven to make waves in the technology industry. Next, we have sorry, I couldn't see you there. Next, we have Lisa Scully. She is the general manager of LaGuardia Airport, Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. She's had over 30 years experience working for the Port Authority. She's the chief executive of the 20th largest airport in the United States, also known as LaGuardia. She leads a staff of 400 in operation, maintenance, and development of the airport to ensure a safe, secure, and quality environment. She has an MBA from Pace University, a BS from Rutgers University, and holds an airport certified employee designation from the American Association of Airport Executives. Next, we have Detective Erin Egan. She is in the aviation unit in New York Police Department. She's the first pilot in command with New York Police Department's Air and Sea Rescue Helicopter and Crew. She has a Bachelor of Science in Aeronautical Science. She's the first female instructor pilot in the NYPD, and she has taken part in meaningful life-saving rescues as well. Next, we have Dr. Maxine Lovener. Dr. Maxine Lovener is the chair and professor of the management department here at Vaughn College. She's also my boss.
That's why I was included.
So, in addition to being the chair and professor, She's also a media spokesperson that addresses various aviation safety issues on local, national, and international platforms. She's the author of multiple papers, presentations, and abstracts. She holds a private pilot certificate, and she attained her PhD degree in social medical science from Columbia University in New York. Lastly, we have another one of Vaughn College's own, Dr. Sharon DeVivo. She is the president of Vaughn College. She's been with the college since 1996, and she became president in July 2014. She's broken one of the main barriers here, which is to become the first woman to hold the office at Vaughn College of being the president. And mind you, the college has been open since 1932. So during her tenure, she's been responsible for aspects of the institution, including academic affairs, development, admissions, financial aid, student affairs, and public affairs. She has a doctorate from the University of Pennsylvania and serves on the boards of the Wings Club, International Aviation Women's Association. So let's get started into our questions today. Thank you, ladies, for being here. So the first question that I have stems from an article that was published in Port Authority of New York, New Jersey blog, where Lisa Scully, she mentioned that she was the assistant director in aviation, overseeing air and service development. So at that time, there was a moment where it was assumed that her male staff member was her boss. In response to that, she remained graceful and without allowing this to break her focus. So as a result of this, she took part in having a new partnership emerge with over a decade of relationships that span from that. So my question to you all is has there ever been a time where you've been underestimated, and how did you overcome that, and how did you respond to that?
Was that you
I think it's
first?
for everybody else,
Oh,
right?
okay.
I'll be first. Well, as far as being underestimated, I don't think that would be a good word to use. They just didn't know what I did, you know. So they assumed in the airline business that I was a flight attendant. And then I came about and educated them and said, no, I'm the pilot for this aircraft. And that was one of the workers, one of the American Airline employees. So even they didn't know that they had female pilots. But the passengers also weren't aware of the fact that we had female pilots. So would ask me for pillows, because as an entry pilot, we were first flight engineers, and I'd have to check not only the outside of the aircraft, but the inside cabin to make sure everything was in working condition. And they would ask me for pillows and blankets. But it's just a matter of educating whoever's on the other side of the question for me. That's kind of how I handled it.
My experience is early in my career, I was competing for higher level positions within the organization and wasn't being very successful. And I had a mentor at the time that told me, he said, well, the leadership team, they don't think you basically have what it takes to get the job done. And a lot of it had to do with I didn't come across or present myself in the same manner as my male counterparts. So when you met me, I didn't appear very aggressive, you know, it's a lot more laid back. I wasn't as outspoken, and I didn't talk as much in meetings and things like that. I never knew that this perception existed, but it was because of that mentor that I got that feedback. So he started to give me some pointers on how to address it. And one of the things he said, when we have meetings, he said, you always sit on the side along the wall. He said, if you want to be perceived as someone that's engaged and is about getting things done, you need to take a seat at the table. And so that was number one. The other thing he said, you have to participate in the conversation. He said, if you notice, whenever you say something in a meeting, everyone gets quiet and they listen to what you have to say, because usually what you have to say is very meaningful. I wasn't saying a lot because all my counterparts around me, they were doing a lot of talking, but no one was listening to each other. So I figured, well, why waste my time? I'll just sit here and let them finish, and if I get a chance, then I'll say something. But what he directed me was, you've got to jump in, you have to participate, and you have to be a part of the conversation for people to take you seriously.
So Morgan, you used that example for me, and just I'll build on that with what Olga and Lillian just said. So it is about education. It is about letting people know what your role is, and not being shy about that, being able to speak up and say, no, actually I'm the person here that is leading this discussion, and we're working together. This is my partner, and that is what happened in the example that was referenced by Morgan. But then it is also about, and it really is a message to, I think, youth in general, but because it's a different environment than when I started 20 years ago, and many of us started, because it's really being able to speak up and express yourself. I love what you said, Lillian, and being able to be a part of that equation, because too often what I'm seeing in the business and in the workforce for young people, and for the ladies, just really a great example is, you have to express your opinion. It's valuable, and you need to put it out there. You'll never be, no one will make fun of you, or no one will discredit you for saying that you differ from what is being expressed. But if you don't express anything, you may be seen as not being relevant. And today, relevance is everything. That's how you succeed. So I think those two are really great examples of how to kind of get beyond what people's perceptions are initially of you.
Thanks. Well, I was definitely underestimated when I first got to the aviation unit. Not only did I have to become a cop first, but when I did get assigned to the unit, they were unsure of you. They don't know what you know, how much you know, how you're going to be, how you're going to react, or how you're going to settle in with their environment. So for me, it was just being one of them, never separating myself from anyone else or making it like, well, I'm a woman. That was never my way of getting through it. What I did was I worked with the guys. I learned from them. I knew I was being underestimated, but I knew that if I proved to them that I was going to be able to do the same job, that they would accept me. And for me, that was the way that I got through the beginning. And then once they saw I could do just what they could do, and maybe I can help them out along the way, then I was definitely brought into the fold and had a great experience fitting in the beginning.
Well, there's lots of stories, and it's really hard to take from individual experience to generalize to what you might find useful. Educating others is definitely important. I think in terms of some of the lessons that I've learned myself are related to patience and determination. One of my favorite stories to tell is, and this comes from being socialized to be a woman from a very early age. So one of my favorite stories is, when I was a child, my dad had a beach house, and he had a beach buggy, and we would drive around on sand dunes. There was a very big lagoon with very wide flats and then some sand dunes. And on those salt flats, over the mountains, small planes would come and they would land. And my dad always thought that it was fun to race the planes, because he would always be sure to win, because they were either landing or taking off. And so he could keep driving. He thought this would impress the kids. But what happened to me was, it seemed so romantic looking at these aeroplanes coming in, landing on the beach. When he would offer for me to drive the beach buggy, I would say, not really, those look like much more fun. And eventually I asked him if I could learn this. And he was friends with somebody who'd fought in the war, and together they both said, absolutely not. Quite impossible. You have to have perfect eyesight, and I'm quite nearsighted. You have to be physically fit to a degree that you probably would never be, And in any case, my dad said, a plane like that costs more than a Mercedes, and I'm not buying you one, so forget it. And so, as an obedient child, I forgot about it. But then when I was eventually in New York, studying here in graduate school, my brother came to visit, and he had, on one of the in-flight magazines, a coupon to go for a sightseeing tour around Manhattan. And so we went in the plane, we flew around Manhattan, and I asked so many questions that the instructor said, well, are you here for a sightseeing tour or are you here for a lesson? And so I said, ooh. And so we had a lesson. My brother very patiently sat in the back, bumped around. And then when I spoke to my dad and said, I think I'm going to learn this, he was okay about it. And so it was an interest that is actually, I have read subsequently, pilots tend to have a very early interest in learning to fly. And if you can pursue that interest without being combative, but really to educate and to be patient, I think that has helped. And wasn't really about being underestimated in the end, I think.
So what popped into my mind as everybody was speaking was my 16-year-old son. So I could share stories about how I've been asked to get the car or, where's the bathroom or those kind of things. But my son has known me to be in a fairly high-level position at Vaughn for almost all of his life. And since he was 12 or 13, he's known me to be the president. And my hope is that when he was faced with a man or a woman in the hallway and they were being introduced and he wasn't sure which one the president is, he would assume it's a woman because he's had a president in his family. And I think as women take over more and more of these leadership positions, and I stand on the shoulders of women who have come before me, and you all will stand on our shoulders, right? That the assumption will be that it's the woman, not that it's always the man.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies. And I definitely agree with, especially the notion that you should have a seat at the table and pretty much involve yourself and to show how serious you are about progressing in your career. So to stem off of that, the next question that I have is, upon attending the New York American Council on Education conference, I attended a conference a little bit earlier this year, and they had a panel discussion really similar to this one. It was called Women, Power in the Boardroom. So after hearing the panelists discuss how women are perceived in the workplace, the question that I posed was, how exactly would you take initiative, maybe besides having a seat at the table, in your growing field, without crossing any boundaries? So I would say, what do you have to say to growing in your field or progressing within your company or organization without overstepping any boundaries?
No, I wanted to answer that question because when we got that, I was a little thrown off about boundaries. And so I think as women, we tend to self-impose boundaries that really aren't there. Opportunities present themselves and there's ability to move forward, and men will look at that description of what's needed and say, hey, I got 50% of those, we're good to go. Women look at that list and say, I only have 50% of those, I'll wait until I get the other 50 before I even try it. So boundaries, or the perception that there are boundaries, are typically self-imposed by ourselves, which we need to get beyond. I mean, I can't think of one role that I've had that I can tell you going into it, I knew 100% of what I needed to know. In some instances, I took positions, I've never done anything in that realm, but I figured I can figure it out. And so you've got to be willing to challenge yourself and move forward and pursue those things that you know you can do, and you figure the rest out along the way.
Does Does anyone else want to add on to that?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I agree with her completely that we set our own, that we make the boundary that doesn't exist, that you feel like you need to do better than everybody else or show that you can do better. But no, you need to do just what everybody else is doing. So don't let it stop you. And that if you keep yourself educated, keep yourself moving, you don't have to wait for them to tell you to go get another degree or do something else. Go do it for yourself, because you never know what opportunity will come for you. So I've always said that don't let a boundary become a boundary, just keep going. And that's been the way I've started one way and have just kept adding a different degree or a different license or a different some sort of class, anything that comes along your way that will just keep adding to what your resume already is or what you've done before.
I definitely agree with that. So to stem off of that, I want to switch gears just a little bit to go into the general stereotypes that women face within the workplace. So according to an article on New York Times' website, common perceptions of women are that we are dependable, less visionary, highly criticized, not typically competitive, and seen as a threat if assertive. Others may debate that women are not in senior level roles because of the fact that there is a lack of women with that set of skills. So to that, do you believe that gender and race barriers exist because of traditional stereotypes or the lack of personnel to choose from, or maybe any other reasons?
That's a lot of parts to that question. But let's start with not enough women in the profession or the workplace to fill the slot. I think women have more options than men because we can be all things. We can be a daughter, a wife, a mother, and have our profession. So we can do it all, you know. We have that option and make work and life balance as we see fit within our family unit. Now, as far as women, as they progress in their careers, they have a choice whether, you know, once they start a family, well, should I stay home? Should I continue to work? And that's when it becomes challenging. I don't think there are enough women in the different professions. It's the time when it's time to step up to the next level is when they have to make that choice. And some of them make a choice. Some of them don't. They'll continue and then make that work-life balance in coordination with the rest of the family unit. And that's the important part. You know, what do you give up? Where do you sacrifice? And how do you move on? So I'm just sharing that.
If I could just add to that, I think that today, certainly in the aviation industry, airport sector, there is a much greater balance than there was when I started 20 years ago. And that simply was because women were not 20 to 30 years ago going into the technical fields or going into the finance, because I have a finance background, which a lot of the female leaders in aviation and airports are on the finance side, but women weren't necessarily going into those fields at that time. And I think that, you know, there is great opportunity, you know, now at the kind of entry level, mid-level, there really are no limits. I don't see that as a restriction. I just think that it takes time to get the credentials and the experience. You can't step into, you know, what they call a C-suite job without having actually worked for a period of time. You don't start out in the executive arena with 5 years of experience. It's just not typical. But I do think that one of the differences, and I totally agree that we are kind of, for women, our portfolio of what we do is very, you know, touches every aspect of not just professionally, but personally. One of the things that, and I encourage is to just not limit yourself, going back to the issue of boundaries, and feel, and here's where, for me, I'll make it personal, it has been difficult, is that typically in gender issues, for men, they're more apt to take a position and move their family. and uproot everyone. And that I have 4 sons, and I have given up opportunities that continuously come to me because of the age of my children. And typically a man would not do that. He would come home and say to his wife, we're leaving, we're gonna move, it's better for the family. And that's a difference. For me personally, it doesn't apply to all female leaders. But I think for the young people today, you're much more portable is the word I like to use, and mobile. And so I would encourage you to continue that and not feel that your children actually, or family, or just your individual opportunities can be improved if you kind of keep an open mind to that, just like, the men have traditionally done over the course of their careers, and it will open more to you. But I do see in the airport business, there's a much broader range of female leaders, and, it has evolved tremendously, and I don't think those limits are there that were there for me when I started.
For me, the difference would be, or the way I look at it as being a pilot, is there probably is still not enough of us out there, and I think it's because we don't get exposed to it as children. I was lucky enough that my father was a pilot and just exposed me to it. It wasn't his job or anything, but it was something he liked to do. And I believe you have to instill in your children that they can do anything. And that I look at myself and go, I was lucky that my father exposed me to aviation, because I ended up really, truly loving it. Now I have a daughter, she's 2.5, and I want her to say who exposed her to aviation, if she goes that way, to say her mom. How cool is that? Such a different way of life. Like she said, 20 years ago, not that many people thought I was crazy. My friends thought I was crazy. But I was lucky enough to meet a roommate who also wanted to be a pilot when I got to college, who was also, she was female. So it was a great experience. But I really do think it's what you're exposed to when you're young, and that knowing that you can do whatever it is. And then, yes, then it gets to the point where you do have to make those decisions and balance with your family and your personal life, because that's where I'm at. It's tough doing one job and then having to go home and be a mom. So you definitely have to look at all those things as well, depending on what you want to do. But it doesn't mean you can't do what you want to do and still have a family as well. It can be done.
There are aspects of socialization that we're all socialized. Parents hold their infant boys and infant girls in different manners. The boys, you hold them and face them, and the girl you hold to the side. So we're brought up in society to have certain attitudes to people who fit into certain groups. And unfortunately, we also tend to organize ourselves hierarchically. And so women have for a very long time in our society been considered one down or less powerful than the men. And it's truly so in terms of men moving their families, that there are statistics that show, certainly for women of our generation, where women who earn a certain amount of money, half of them tend to be married, and of those only half have children, whereas men of the same age and income, 90% are married and have children. So I think certainly in terms of the socialization, we have to work really hard to achieve what we want, and sometimes there isn't that balance, and sometimes we do make sacrifices. Again, if we're really interested, then it's easy to work that hard. If we really like what we do, it doesn't matter what your gender is. But I think that, as Sharon was saying, the charge is to educate and to serve either consciously or unconsciously to help people understand that we actually have the same kind of talent and ability, and it doesn't really matter how easy it is to classify us as being black or female or old or whatever. It doesn't mean that because we're easy to classify into a one-down category, that that's where it ends. And so as long as we can keep broadening our focus into the more detailed responsibilities and talents and persistence of that person, we can help get women further along in all types of careers that interest them.
So I heard a frightening statistic yesterday, is that the pay gap between men and women will not be closed until 2119. I didn't say 2019, I said 2119. That's 100 years from now. That's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And so I think we have to fight too. I don't mean that in an aggressive, take down your enemy kind of way, but I mean, we have to fight for what we are entitled to. We have to make sure that we don't just take the first salary that's offered if we think and we know we're worth more. That when we get into positions of being managers, that maybe we take the names off the resumes before we send them to the search committees, so that people look at talent, not gender, as the first thing they look at. That would be true for race as well. And that adage, you have to be the change you want to see. That's true for men and women in this case. But we shouldn't put up with a pay gap until 2119. We've got to change that.
I definitely do agree that we do have to be the change that we want to see. And in many cases, it does start internally, and success not only starts from our hard work, but it also starts with our mindset. How are we thinking? How are we seeing ourselves? Do we see that we are good enough? Are we able to actually put ourselves out there and have that seat at the table? So with that, I know that Sharon, you mentioned race for 1 second. I want to branch off of that a little bit, and not only that, but with the pay gap issue. We're aware that there is an issue with equality in the workplace. So with us being aware of that, what can we do to change that in the future? What can employers do to change that, and what can employees do to change that as well?
I'll take that. Oh, yeah, sure.
So training, education, making sure that you're providing opportunities to practice those skills. There's all kinds of great online resources now. Making sure you're building teams that are well integrated in terms of race and gender. When you get into those manager positions, that's when you can really start to have an impact on those kinds of things. They don't just change on their own. They don't. You have to be conscious and deliberate about those things. So that's why I mentioned taking names off resumes for a first pass. Just try to make sure that you're looking at experience and talent. Because just like somebody on the panel said, this idea that, well, I don't have enough skills, I've only got 50%, right? And meanwhile, you've got far more than maybe 10 of the other competitors in that pool. If you take the name off, then you're only looking at skill sets. So making sure that people share your values when they're also hiring. Making sure you're training search committees, that you're, training, first-line managers that might be hiring. It's not just going to happen on its own.
To add to that, I think the other thing that employers have to do more consciously is you've got to diversify your workforce, especially at the levels that are making the decisions. And a number of places will say, well, we can't find people, they're not out there. They are. You may not know how to find them, but there are organizations, there are alumni groups, there are other companies that are doing well in that space who can help you get there. So if you sit back and try to do that just under your normal means of recruiting and search, and you're not being successful, then you have to do something different. But until you have a diversified a group of people that are making the decisions on who gets promoted, who gets hired, who are high potentials, it's not going to change. It simply is not going to change unless you start doing something differently.
And if I could just add to that, I think organizations, leaders and organizations have an obligation to create opportunities for individuals to network within their groups, whether that be within organizations that, like we at the Port Authority, we really embrace having a multitude of cultural organizations, whether that's a Hispanic society or National Black Employees Society, a female networking group. And it's not to isolate, but it's to help build on where there were obstacles or there was learning experiences. It's best to be learned within a like environment, and then share that message. And then as the leaders, we have an obligation to help mentor. I use that example all the time. I mean, I'm very, Vaughan College is near and dear to me. This is an amazing school, and the Port Authority, we have a tremendous relationship in hiring and bringing students from Vaughan over to our airports. In fact, Brianna is sitting in the back. She's one of our current management interns from Vaughan, and she works in my office. And she's fabulous and has done some tremendous things. But continuing to invest in the local students and in those that can make the difference for the future, and being a mentor. I've started groups where we recognize the women that are in aviation, on a regular basis, and bring them together to say, here's great examples. Here's great examples to the young professionals entering. And I have to really applaud that there was a point, and only because the female air traffic control manager moved on to a promotion, but there was a point only a year ago where Sharon, as the president of Vaughan University, Vaughan College, as a woman leader, I was running the airport. We had a female air traffic control manager, and we had 5 major commercial airline station managers that were females, which was unheralded. And we put this program together, and we showed the young ladies that are working, you can do this. There's no limits here. I mean, this is the metropolitan region, and look at this. You're a major 20th largest airport in the country is being fed by an institution, a workforce development area, by a woman leader, an executive, and then the airport's being run by all women, and it was a great thing. And so, and we have great partners in our male peers and male colleagues, so it doesn't stop there, but it's the point to make that we have an obligation to give back, and we've got to continue to do that.
If I could just add, I really applaud that, and I think that we do have a responsibility to look at how we were socialized and what we experienced, and to make a conscious effort not to repeat that.
Mm-hmm.
And to try to behave as mentors ourselves. We've all had somebody, Sharon, who said, I think we'll hire you at Vaughan. And she mentioned that I was a woman and liked that idea. And I never forgot that. And so we have to really make a conscious decision to go against some of the things that we experienced, and make sure that they don't happen to other people, and to sometimes talk about that. Well, I wasn't heard in a meeting, so when you come to the meeting, make sure you say something as a mentor.
I just wanted to add one item, and for the men in the audience, this is not to exclude the men. Okay, there are things that happen for men in the workplace that are innate to the environment and have been in place for a very long time. It's not there for women. So what we are saying are the things that we have to do a little differently to elevate women and get them some of the same opportunities that men are seeing on a regular basis.
I just wanted to add to that a lot of women have women mentors. I had male mentors, being the only female in my field at the time. So I was very fortunate, but it was the way you project yourself, you come across, and you have that confidence of, I can do this, and how can you help me? And you have to ask for help. Don't be afraid to seek out your mentor. So that's very important as you move up.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies. So the notion that senior level management and employers should definitely share the same values. In addition to that, I think it's also important, just to sum up, that employers themselves can use their platform to provide resources for those who may not have it. And in addition to that, maybe work on partnerships with colleges and institutions who may be able to provide those skills for them. So on the employees' end, or at the applicant's end, it's very important to continue to educate yourself and continue to know what's going on around you. So we're getting a little bit low on time, but one of my last questions is for anyone who is in this room, whether they're faculty, staff, students in any level, what advice do you have for them overall as far as keeping that mindset of I am successful and I can do this and I can progress in my career?
I guess that's something. Well, to keep you progressing even in the face of something happening to you is probably the hardest thing. So I myself was involved in an aircraft accident in which it was a mechanical issue, obviously, obviously because I'm still flying, right? Good. But it was a mechanical issue, and it's coming back from that, like knowing that you didn't do anything wrong, that you are just as good as everybody else, not letting it fall on you that, oh, it's the woman pilot that had the accident. Like, don't let that get to you. You have to break past that and get back on it and keep going, and just don't let anybody stop you. Don't let an accident or something that comes in your path slow you down or keep you from doing what you want to do. That's the best advice I could probably give anyone, is don't let anything stop you from doing what you want to do. Deal with it, get over it, and keep going. Don't let it hold you back. I don't know if you...
I'm not sure of the exact numbers, but I think about 6% of this country's pilots are female, and they
still
account
very low.
for about 4% of the accidents.
Exactly. That's a good statistic.
And I think it's not taking on every opportunity, not feeling inhibited,
Yep.
and always evolving yourself. But I actually have to implore everyone, it's about continuous education, and it's not just academic education, but I find it almost startling how many people don't actually listen to, nor do they explore the news. Do they look at like the industry publications or the industry, intelligence that comes out and keep themselves relevant? Just because you have a degree or you have a job experience, you have to, doesn't make you forever marketable. You have to be able to continuously, drive that you are looking to improve yourself. And so please, I encourage everyone, understand what's happening in your business. Keep, abreast of that. Keep really aware of changing technologies, because, I feel sometimes, and it goes to like even just being aware of how to use real technology. We can kind of shut ourselves out of the marketplace if we aren't engaged. And so that's a message that I like to, and I give it to my sons. It's not just about, knowing how to use a game on the phone, but, do you know how to use the news app? Like, use the news app. Read a little bit. So it's very important.
Get out of your comfort zone. The comfort zone can kill your career if you just sit and wait and stay in a place too long. Take some risks. It was mentioned earlier, as you move along in life and you have a family and kids, your options become a little less for a period of time. So my advice to anyone, you're single, you're young, you don't have a lot of commitments, take some risks. Be willing to move, take an assignment internationally. All these things are open to you early in your career. Not to say that they won't be there later in the career, but when you're in a position to make those decisions and you don't have a family to consider, you don't have someone else that you need to consult with, take advantage of that.
I also would recommend networking. Find organizations in the field that you're in and network within that organization, because you can learn so much more from others in your profession, whether it be locally or nationally or even internationally. And you never know when that opportunity would come up. Because if there's something you want to do, I always tell young students, tell everybody you know, I want to do this. You never know who you're talking to. You don't know who they are or who they know, and the opportunity might present itself. So seek out organizations and then just, sell yourself, and you'll hopefully get that opportunity. And continue to learn, through publications and within your own industry and profession.
Thank you, ladies. So we have a couple minutes left. I'm going to open up the floor for any Q&A that we might have. Do we have any questions in the audience? Dr. Canellis?
You have a mic for him?
In all of your careers, you obviously all supervised both men and women. I don't think I need more than that.
Just for behind you.
Okay. You supervise both men and women. I would like you to comment, if you would please, on whether or not there's a difference in the interpersonal dynamics in working with men compared with women, and supervising men versus women. If so, if you could describe a few of those situations, and if that's in fact the case, I'd also be interested to know whether or not you found those dynamics changing between the time that you were let's say, a first level supervisor on through middle management and so forth.
That's a good question.
I don't find the differences so much between men and women, is that everybody I supervise is slightly different. I don't think I've ever classified it as, oh, that would be. I have found over the years, though, that more men that have worked for me have shared family issues, right? So that wasn't necessarily true. So I need to get home to be there for a baseball game, or I got to get home to, or I have to stay home because I need to take care of the sick child. I love that, right? Because that means you're really engaged and involved, and I want to support that. So for me, it hasn't been about men and women. It's just been about, supporting them where they're at the time.
For me, I don't actually supervise people in a management role or anything like that, but I will say that women tend to be harder on women because we want to see them exceed and want to see them do better. And or some women feel that other women are being hard on them, but it's really not the case. We're really trying to help them. Myself, I was the only female there for a very long time that was in the pilot role, and only had one supervisor that was female that was also a supervisor, and she was amazing. And now we now have another female pilot that works with us, and she's amazing. But giving advice sometimes is hard too. It's like showing them a good way to succeed could be taken the wrong way, meaning from other women. They're like, well, what do you mean you're telling me that? But it is all to support and all to help. So the best thing we can do is help other women and mentor other women and make them feel like they can do this. Don't be harder on them just because you know you had it hard. So I find that we do, especially in my department or in my role, I find that a lot, that we tend to try to toughen the other woman up and try to get them going. But I think you just really need to help them and give them a helping hand and give them that good advice.
So I have the opportunity to manage and supervise a lot of different individuals, and I will go to, really reinforce what Sharon said. Everyone is different, and I will give two examples of what I find more distinction today is kind of the generational distinction. And this is difficult because I have the conversation often, and it always stems around, go and talk to somebody, pick up the phone, don't send an email, please don't ever text. Really kind of getting past that generational divide of people's social skills and being able to go and have a conversation with someone is more of what I'm trying to focus on in the workforce, because it's a skill that isn't as apparent anymore with some of the younger people coming up, and it really is because the technology has created a different dynamic. But there are some things when I see something though that might be different, because it is, and here's the example I'll use. One of the last vestiges really for me about the gender gap in terms of how things are approached in the workforce is when it comes to I'm trying very hard to keep a culture at the airport of employee engagement socially, because it's important to know people socially and get to spend time together outside of like your discrete job duties. And every time we plan an event, it's the women planning the event. And so I've now just gone directly to the men that work for me. I'm like, you're planning the next event. This is silly. What is it that, all the women are planning every single one of the parties? And I find that it's very funny because the gentlemen have said to me, I just don't really know how to do that. Like, at home, think about it. My, wives, mothers, sisters, everybody. And so it's kind of funny because now they have started to step in. And it wasn't because it was felt like that wasn't their job. The guys are just like, I didn't do this before and didn't want to feel like it wasn't going to be good. So that to me is like a really last vestige of that. But it really in my workforce, it's more generational. And so we're working very hard to even out the spectrum with those differences.
You gave them the opportunity.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
They may be.
And the events that have now been, just most recently been planned have been great. They've been great.
They missed their calling.
On that one last item about is there a difference through levels? I see a difference in leading supervisors versus more executive levels. It's not by gender. It has more to do with experience.
Thank you, ladies. So we're getting a little bit close to closing right now. We're going to have a networking session right after this. So if anyone has any additional questions, we can hold them until at 12 o'clock. We're going to close this middle partition here, and then we're going to move on to the back side, which is the A side of this room, because there's a class going to come in here soon. So
I think the class has been moved.
it's been moved?
Oh.
Okay, so we have a few more rounds for Q&A. So if anyone else has any questions, you can come on up. Hi, Jenny.
Take the mic.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Arjanis. I'm a senior here at Long College.
Just use the mic so everybody behind you can hear.
So,
The class is going to happen.
Oh, okay.
just a quick question. I would like to know, I'm also a brother, I'm a son. For our future generation of women, my daughter, future daughter, what advice you say we would give on how to raise? Because obviously the human body, we start learning, being influenced at a very young age. So what advice you say you'll get growing up that would be adequate to make them inspired to become powerful in the world first as women?
I'm going to take that question if you all don't mind. My daughter's 42 years old, and she's a very strong young woman. We always told her that, when she was growing up, she goes, Mom, the guys are afraid of me. I go, of course they are, because you're very confident. You know who you are and what you want, and they're just learning about themselves. So stay as you are and be true to yourself and move on, because eventually they'll catch up to you.
It's great advice. Great advice.
I can add something to that. I'll be able to. So I have an almost 19-year-old daughter and a 16-year-old son, and it's not anything special that I did just with Emily. I did it with Emily and Dylan, and that was to teach them how to make decisions from a very young age. So I'm not a control freak. They didn't have to have waffles in the morning if that's not what they wanted. So we can start with little things like that. Do you want cereal or do you want waffles? And they make a decision, right? Do you want to wear the blue pants or the red pants? I didn't just pull it out and make them wear it. So giving them the opportunity to practice decision making from a really young age, whatever's age appropriate, helps them to build confidence, and that translates into some work skills. The other thing that my husband and I both did that might be helpful as well is we talked about work at the dinner table. So they would hear, both my kids have heard about my struggles in terms of being a leader and managing and things I did right, things I didn't do right. And it's very interesting now that my daughter's in an internship to hear her say some of the things back that I talked about over the years. So make sure you talk about your work experience, because she'll learn from that too.
I was just going to add that to expose them to books that are showing them girls doing cool stuff, like being doctors or being veterinarians or whatever it is. And I look back, my little one's only 2, or going to be 2.5, so I'm starting that now, where I'm looking for stories that show women in cool roles. And it's very difficult to find children's stories about girls that are pilots. So you have to then, well, I'm already working on that, but that's beside the point. But that's like one of the other things I want to do is to inspire kids when they're really small. Show them, there's a series now that's like Ada Twist Scientist is one of the names, and it shows a black female girl learning all these cool things and becoming a scientist at the end. And those are the kind of things I think you need to expose when they're really, really small, and so that they see from so young these girls doing these really neat things, or different things. Just like I said, like there's a great cartoon on Disney, the pet vet. I forget her name already, but and it shows this little, that's it, and she's a pet vet, and that to me was like, Doc McStuffins, that's it. And to me that's so cool. Like, it's such an inspiring story that when kids get to see that when they're young. So I think that's really, really important.
Oh, the mic.
Oh, sorry.
All right, so thank you, ladies. Thank you for offering such powerful words of wisdom and your insight today. And this is something I'm sure that the audience and myself are much appreciative of, and that we all can learn a great deal from. And I have a special message for the audience. I want to encourage you all, no matter what career field you're in, no matter what your aspirations are, I want to encourage you all to pursue your dreams at full speed. Know that you can have anything that you want, and you can do anything that you want in life, as long as you continue to work hard. Have a strong mindset and have a strong support system as well. Obstacles are a given, but it's not the fact that we have obstacles in front of us that define us, but it's how we jump over those hurdles that make us truly who we are and that define us. I want to urge you, and I want to challenge you all before you leave today, to continue to educate yourselves in your field and also in the news on any current events of what's going on around you. Because maybe with that, you can help to make your environment a much better place. So I also challenge you to go miles in a world where you're only given an inch. I challenge you all to elevate, to focus, to continue to grow your mind. Thank you all. My name is Morgan Stewart, and this was Women Exceeding Barriers.